On this episode of Gun Talk Hunt, we're talking high fence. Is it ethical? Is it the right choice for you? All right here. All right, welcome in Gun Talk Hunt fans. I'm your host, KJ, and today we got a very special episode because it's just me and we're winding KJ up and setting him free. But first, Gun Talk Hunt is proudly brought to you by Hodgdon. The gunpowder people, you know them, you love them. Silencer Central, silence delivered. Brownells, serious about firearms since their inception, whenever that was. They're great. And Timney Triggers, the world's finest triggers. And Smith Wesson, yeah, we're familiar. That should be their new slogan. It really should be. Yeah, we're all familiar with them. But so, man, I'm sitting back. I sit back in my office chair, and Michael, one of our editors, comes in and says, "Hey, we're doing a podcast today, right?" And I'm like, "Totally, we're on. We're doing it." And it's funny because we have a lot of time to think about things typically, and today I just wanted to talk about some hunts that I've had in a high fenced area. And if a lot of you don't know, high fence hunting really took off as a way to manage whitetails roughly right around in the 1970s. And that was the goal, was to manage whitetails for trophy size antlers and to, grow these giant racks and produce breeder bucks and to better their overall herd at that operation. It has since grown. And when most people think about high fence hunting, what they're thinking about is they're thinking about those big Texas ranches. Little do they know that there's ranches in Indiana, there's ranches in Michigan, there's ranches in Arkansas, there's high fence ranches all over the place. Even here in Louisiana, they've got high fence. There's a high fence elk hunting operation just outside of the little town of Covington that we're in that houses I think it's like 150 elk. It's on a small plot of land. But Texas is really what you think of when you start to think about those high fence hunting ranches. And you'd be surprised. And I'm going to tell you right now, man, I want to be so strongly against high fence hunting. There's a couple of reasons why I want to be against it. And for the life of me, forever, I was against high fence hunting. I didn't feel that it was ethical. I felt that, you just walk in a pen, you shoot a deer, or you shoot an axis, a black buck, a roe deer, whatever it is, a zebra, an impala, whatever they've got under that location. But there's a lot that goes behind it. There's size of property that you're hunting, and there's logistics, and there's terrain. Things that we take for granted is when I think of like a high fence hunting, typically what I'm imagining is, okay, you've got a high fence hunt, you go on it, and they're all at a feeder, you take a shot and you're done. It's clear ground. It's all nicely manicured. They're eating out of a protein feeder, and that's about it, Until I really went on a high fenced hunt that was challenging, did I not anticipate changing my mind? And this hunt, I went on one hunt when I would say it's about 13 years ago, and it didn't change my mind. So we put on media events. So in my former life, I was a PR, planner guy. I would sit there and I would plan these media hunts for media types, and we'd have them on a hunt, and it's all about being successful. And a lot of times, when guys go on these hunts and they don't have a lot of time, or they need to create a show, or they need to create content, a high fence hunting operation is really, really easy. And it's really it is 100% one of the most effective ways to produce content, because we all see these videos of these content producers that are harvesting these bucks. And there was one video that really set me off against the whole high fence hunting. And maybe I didn't give it a fair shake, but this helicopter lands and the guys are getting off and they're greeting each other and they're saying, "Oh yeah, hey, how's it going?" And all of a sudden, well, that's the deer you're hunting for right there. Like literally the helicopter is just like, is not even, the rotors are still running on this sucker. And the guy goes, "Oh yeah, that is him." And he grabs the gun out of the chopper and shoots the deer right there. And he's like, "Well, I guess my hunt's done." That's like, I think a lot of people envision like how these high fence hunting operations go. And that's really not the case. But anyway, back to the old PR days. So this is really funny. I was in Oklahoma and I have a lifetime license in Oklahoma. So I didn't want to burn my personal tag on a hunt. Now, a lot of these hunts were, they were low fence hunting in this particular area that we were hunting, but it was an expansive ranch, had a lot of room to run, but it was all low fence. But there was a high fence with hogs in it. And so I was like, hey, instead of going like whitetail hunting, could I just hop in the little high fence for hogs and spend my day in there? And the outfitter was like, so you're telling me you'd rather not shoot, 160, 170 potential class whitetail, and you'd rather walk around in a high fence? And I'm telling you, like, it's scary. Like it was frightening because these hogs, I was walking through really thick shinnery and really thick brush, but they were captive on a 60-acre plot. I saw one hog the whole time I was there. And that's when I started to realize, like, there's something more to this high fenced game. Like, there's just something more to it. And then I swore off high fence hunting. I was like, you know what? I want to do all my stuff low fence or public land, and if it's private, I'd like to stick really kind of like lean into the low fence hunting. And then Silencer Central, who's a great supporter of ours, they called me up, about 2 months ago, and they kind of talked to me about, going on in a media event, and how these media events typically operate is they bring you up, they wine you, dine you, and you get to use all the cool new products. We get to see the new products. And unfortunately, I can't talk about theirs yet. I've got to get them on and talk about that. But we were hunting the FTW Ranch, and I've been out here before, and it's like most Texas ranches that you think about. It's 13,000 acres, high fence. Like, the whole thing's high fenced. 13,000 acres, and we're hunting whitetail. I did not see a trophy class whitetail until the 5th day of the hunt. And that to me is a little bit surprising, because you would think like it's the rut, they're moving a little bit more. It should have been prime time. So you should have been seeing bucks all throughout the day, but it was hard hunt. The terrain made it possible for those deer to hide until they were ready to come out. And it really started to change my mind on these high fence operations. But two, we're going back to the kind of more of the conservation side of this. Texas ranches hold a lot of African game and non-native game species that are growing. Take the black buck from India. Like, they have more black buck in the state of Texas than they do all of India, and that's where they're native to. So Texas is doing something right. These high fence ranches that really monitor and conserve the game on their properties, and they really tailor their conservation programs based on the models that they build. Man, it has to start changing your mind at some point. And I'm not here to tell you like, oh, you should be for high fence hunting, whether you believe it or not. Like, that's fine. I'm just giving you my rundown on it. So they're doing really good. Like, these ranches that really do have programs set to, introduce new species, maybe threatened species, and to grow the numbers of them is a great example of why you would want to support high fence operations. The other reason is it definitely is not. It's not an easy task, because so my hunt, it started in the first morning. We set up overlooking like 3 different areas. So we kind of set out on this point, and as the sun starts cresting the skyline, we start looking, and you start seeing like there's 3 black buck over here, and and I'm looking for a whitetail. I'm really looking for a trophy whitetail because I just nerd out on whitetails, and that's kind of my game. Well, you start seeing all these different game. We saw some axis buck and some axis does, and not really what we're looking for. Now, don't get me wrong. Axis is delicious. I would have probably shot one as soon as, if it was big enough, I probably would have shot it. But just nothing moving. And then it was a 3.5, 4-day grind trying to locate one. And my guy, Gene, who's this super sniper instructor for the, I believe it's Marine Corps, super great guy, great guide. He's been guiding around FTW Ranch for 15 years now. And man, I'm telling you, what happens when these guys start to get stressed and they know the hunting's a little bit more difficult? It's actually pretty comical because they start like talking. You see them having these holding court. So Tim Fallon will gather the guides up and say, "Hey, what are you guys seeing?" And when a guy tags out, he'll oftentimes go out and observe, tell you what he's seeing from another stand, and kind of report on activity around the ranch. Not a lot of guys were seeing the type of bucks that we were looking for. We were looking for something in the 5.5 to 6.5-year-old range, around the 150 class is really kind of where we wanted. And those were really tough to come by. More shockingly, I wasn't seeing a whole lot of like cull bucks like you'd think you normally see, the 7.5, 8.5-year-old deer that are ready to be taken out of the herd. We only shot 1 cull buck the entire time we were there, and it was a little shocking. But on the other side of these sponsors, I'm going to just jump into it. Gun Talk Hunt is proudly brought to you by Smith Wesson. Did you know they have a new 10mm? So again, we talk about it all the time, but if you're a backpacker or, let's say you're a birder or something in very dangerous areas where they might have 4-legged creatures that wish to do you harm, you need firepower and you need something concealable. And don't forget to practice. Oh, man, always practice with the gun that you plan on carrying and how you plan on carrying. But the Smith & Wesson M2.0 in 10mm would be a great option for you. Comes with 4 palm swell grips, and again, the M2.0 trigger that's on this gun, very nice. Smith-Wesson.com. And Timney Triggers, they have a new enhanced feel trigger shoe that fits all Glocks. So if you're sitting there and you are thinking like, man, I love a Timney trigger, especially that new Alpha competition trigger, but they don't offer it for, maybe a G43 like I've got. But you love the feel of the trigger shoe on the Alpha competition trigger. Well, Timney Triggers has you covered because now you can get it for all Glocks. So it'll fit a G48, it'll fit a G43, a G22. So any Glock you want, you can have a Timney enhanced feel trigger shoe. TimneyTriggers.com to learn more. And Brownells. Are you without ammunition? I don't know if you've heard about this or you've even been keeping up with the component side of things. Brownells has what you need. 6.5 Grendel, 300 AAC, 300 blackout, vice versa. 9mm 45, 380. They've got it all. Also 10mm rounds. So if you're looking for more ammunition, Brownells always has you covered. And I'm also shopping Brownells for components, for brass, for primers, for powder. All those little details, Brownells definitely has you covered. Visit brownells.com to learn more. Okay, so we're on the last day of the hunt, and it's an entertaining process because now they're starting to stress because me or my guide haven't seen a buck that would score over 105 inches. So we're seeing some nice little 8 points, just bucks that just aren't the deal. And there was a buck that, man, I should have shot him. I really should. Now looking back on it, I look at the deer in my like mind and I sit there and go, "Oh, I probably should have shot him." He showed up that morning and I elected to pass him because I just thought he was just too young. And one of these things on the high fence hunts is that they really manage these deer. They know the deer. Typically they do. Some areas they've never seen this deer before. And that happens a lot on ranches as big as the FTW, 13,000 acres. But this deer had off the right side, it kind of had a funky right side of its antler, but it had this big kickstand drop tine that had what looked like, just a big club at the end of it. And it had a little bit of velvet still hanging on there, dried on there. I really should have shot that thing. It was a 9-inch drop, like it had a 9-inch drop on it. I know my buddies are going to listen to this podcast now and they're going to go, "God, Kevin, KJ, you are an idiot." But he wouldn't have scored that much. He would have been, in the 130 with the kickstand. He probably would have touched 140. I just didn't think, I thought if you give him another year, that's going to make someone unbelievably happy. And so we elected not to take that deer. And then the other deer we saw had a tag in its ear. It's one of those that, if you shoot it, you're going to be taking out a second mortgage on your home. It was a breeder buck. And my guy, like, seriously had a sit down conversation. He said, "Look, like if that deer is there, like aim the opposite direction." So I was like scolded, and it burned a hole in my memory now. But so the last, and we weren't set up in a blind. We were, sitting on hillsides, and we were kind of slow walking and kind of like stalking our way through the hill country of, West Texas. And when I say hill country, this is rough country. This is rough terrain. It's not easy walking, and, they have all the amenities to make the hunt as leisurely as you'd like, but we kind of wanted to be out in the open and just, go about our business. So the last evening of the hunt, I've got nothing left. Like this is exactly how my season has gone. For me, this season was a complete struggle fest. Like, and of course it would come down to the last evening. And the last evening they were like, "Hey, you're going to go out way earlier. They were like, "You're going to go out at about 2:00 and you're going to sit until dark." And I'm thinking, okay, well, I got no problem with that. I'll sit all day if you'd like me to, which is honestly what I prefer during this time of the year, because you never know what's going to happen. Even on a high fence ranch, the deer are doing their thing. They're running and they're chasing and they're moving in and moving out. Well, they decide like, "Hey, you really need to be in a box blind. You need to go up there. You need to set up, and you need to just take your time and just sit in a blind." Okay. One thing that I have learned over the years, if you go on any media events or you pay for a hunt and the guides are telling you like, this is what you're going to have to do in order to get something on the ground, just do it. Put your morals aside, put your ego aside, and like just say, if that's what you say and that's what makes this better, that sounds good. Because that morning, the morning before I went out in the afternoon, we had 3 deer. Like we were busted by 3 deer, doing the walk and stalk kind of thing. So they were like, "Let's get out super early and get in the blind." So we do that. And wouldn't you know it, like the cameraman all of a sudden's like, "Hey, I want to go with you. Like, can we go with you?" And he's a great guy. Mark Webb, love you. If you're listening, man, you did a great job. I don't know how I held it together. he's like, I want to go with you. And typically I kind of like to keep my hunting parties small. So there's three of us crawling up into the stand. You know, Gene goes up first, the guide goes up first, and he sits there and he gets the gun. He gets the gun up there, gets it ready, unloaded, safe. And then I go up, and then Mark comes up, the cameraman. And it's so funny because I'm like, okay, this is good. And Gene's kind of, you know, Gene's such a great guide. He's like, are you okay? Are you comfortable? You know, maybe he saw the deer or he knew the deer. I don't know how he knew, but I was like, hey, do you mind if I, you know, put the gun out the window, get comfortable, get situated and everything else? And he goes, yeah, do that. And another guide on the ranch had said, he said, hey, there's a deer that has been within a mile and a half of this area. He said, this is the deer you want to take. This is the perfect deer. Like, this is the one you want. This one we're looking for. But I'm going to tell you this right now. If that drop tine buck stepped out, he was toast too. So we sat there and I'm getting comfortable and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel good. You know, we build the base, and that was one of the big things around the SAM course, the Sportsman's all-terrain, all-weather marksmanship program that FTW puts on. So I get all comfortable and I get locked in and the gun's sticking out and, you know, I'm trying to not make too much noise. He goes, go ahead and rack one. So I rack one and I go, you know, there's deer at the like voluntary feeder. I mean, I call it a voluntary, it's like a freedom feeder. So these big ranches will oftentimes, they don't feed corn like you normally would, like someone like me would do or something like that. But it's like a high protein diet. One, they've got to stay healthy throughout the hot Texas summers, which is brutal in itself. But they've got to have good fawn growth too. And so that's why they feed like protein pellets or something like that. And so they're just, you know, eating out of these feeders. And I was like, you know, there's deer right there. And he goes, yeah, I see him. And they're 160 yards away, roughly, something like that. And we had been working on long range shooting all the time. And I know 160 yards isn't far from a lot of people. But for me now, living in Louisiana, 116 yards is a little bit of a poke. So we've been working on it. I'm very comfortable. I've shot out stands my entire life. So we get up there, settled in, guns out the window, deer at the feeder. And I go, hey, do you think I should shoot the one on the right? And he goes, no. He goes, that one is the one with the tag in it. And I'm just messing with him at this point because he is stressed out. He's like, if you shoot that deer, like I will lose my job. And so, of course, what do? I start laying on thick. I'm like, well, I mean, he looks pretty good. Like, I'm pretty sure I could finance him. Like, I don't think he'd be too mad. But anyway, so there was another deer at the feeder. And like, I look at Gene and I go, that deer is pretty good. And he goes, yeah, that's the one you're going to shoot right now. And I'm like, well, I haven't been in the stand all but 7 minutes. And so I sit there and I'm thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, this is going to happen within the first 10 minutes I sit in a stand. And the deer just happened to be there. He had been in the area. He was actually, we thought we might have seen this deer in the morning, but he was, you know, a mile and a half away. He was a mile away. And so, you know, the odds of him showing up were, I mean, I guess I'd call it maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40. But he was there within this first 7-10 minutes. Now I'm getting jacked up. Like, this is going to happen. And so the cameraman's sitting there and I'm like, are you ready? He's like, I'm ready. I was like, I'm ready. So I like settled, and the deer like read the script. Like, he sat there and like I handed it to him that morning and he read it and he was like, okay, this is what you want me to do. I'll do it. So he gets on the, you know, he's on the complete opposite side of the deer with the tag in its ear. Thank goodness. Real quick, I'm going to jump in from a word from our sponsors. Silencer Central. Did you know you can actually have a suppressor delivered to your door? Very easy. Very easy. Silencer Central has figured the game out. And especially with the new ATF-E forms, which Silencer Central is doing, you could have your suppressor in probably less than 90 days. That's what the estimated wait time is. 90 days. I'm still waiting on my Banish 30, and it's been over a year. But that was doing it the old way. Do it the new way with Silencer Central's new e-forms, and you can do it all from the comforts of your home. They will send you the fingerprint kit. You take a selfie. You're going to have to jump over to the ATF's website and grab a quick PIN code, give it to Silencer Central, and then you're on your way. I mean, they do everything. They manage your trust, which is huge. So for more information, visit silencer-central.com. Also, Hodgdon Powder Company. So I'm doing this new thing. It's called reloading. This is my New Year's resolution, and I can't get this done without the Hodgdon Reloading Data Center. So what this data center is it tells me the formula that I want to make. So I go in there and I select, okay, I'm going to do a 6.5 Creedmoor. I want to do a 120 grain CX bullet from Hornady, brand new. What do I do? And it'll spit out all the information that I need to. It'll give me, options like Varget, which I'm really considering using the Hodgdon Varget powder. It's a new one for me. So I've shot it before because of the distinct smell, but I think this new CX bullet might be a deal for my new 6.5 Creedmoor. And especially loading it at 120 grains. I'm thinking it might be a perfect round for my 7-year-old. So we're going to see where that goes. But again, Hodgdon Reloading Data Center is the place to go. Visit HodgdonReloading.com. So I'm settling in for this shot. And it is, I don't know if it's having the guide next to me. I don't know if it's having a cameraman over my shoulder. I start to seriously get buck fever here. And it is, honestly, it's not that much fun. Because if you know me, I get jacked up. I get excited for this stuff. And I had to take a moment, which doesn't happen that often. I actually had to come off the optic, look at the guide, and I said, what's wrong with me? And he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he said, man, hair in the scope. And I kind of took me a second to kind of get what he was saying, but man, that hair in the scope, once that hair gets in the scope, that's when the juices really start pumping. And that's exactly what that was. Call it simple buck fever. And it happens to all of us. It does. It happens. But man, if I ever lose that feeling, just kick me out of the hunting club right now, because I got so jacked up that I had to take my finger off the trigger, take my scope off of hair, and I had to just settle down for a second. And then I got back on the gun, took a few quick breaths. And I think it's important to note we were using the Leupold VX4 optic, great optic. And I had it dialed all the way up to 14. I had a great sight picture, but I think, if I would have dialed that back a little bit, let's say to 12 or something like that, that would have been a little bit better for controlling that wobble, because you're never going to get rid of it. It's just the fact. And I think that's important to know, is that you're not going to be perfectly still, but I think it's just settling those nerves and walking that shot in and just calling your shot. The shot went off. Best shot I made all year, because I saw the deer pile up within 30 yards. And that happens a lot, but honestly, this year it's been one of those years that it's been rough. It's been rough for me. I haven't been able to call my shot as much as I would have liked. But that was my high fence hunting on the FTW Ranch. And I think it's important to note, we had 8 guys in camp. 6 of them left with critters. So 6 out of 8 were successful. There were 2 guys that hunted just as hard as I did that walked away with nothing. And I think that's one of the bigger misconceptions about high fence hunting, is that it's so easy, is that it is a guarantee, which could not be further from the truth. I was moments of walking. I was one hunt away from walking away with 0. And I would have been fine with it because I got to see a lot of good stuff. I've got quality education on hunting, but there was a great chance that I could have walked away with nothing. Like, if your standards are such that you're like, this is what we're looking for, I want to walk within the regulations and the specs that the outfitter gave me, so I need to do that. So 2 guys walked away with nothing, and it starts to change your mind on this whole high fence hunting, that given the scope of maybe what FTW Ranch is, it's probably a pretty dang good thing, because these guys are doing stuff with conservation that's unbelievable. So I'm just saying, before you get up in arms about high fence hunting, maybe it's time to stop and look what they're doing for conservation. And also, man, just go experience one. That's one of my biggest things, is experience how it's done right. And it seems to be that FTW Ranch is really doing a great job. And it's just rethink it, man. So anyway, I'm gonna tie that up right there. I'm gonna tie a nice bow on it right there. But Gun Talk Hunt fans, thank you for joining in, and thanks for being here this season. Thanks for walking through the ups and downs with us. We've got a lot of big things going to happen in 2022. You guys are going to want to stick on, but it's going to be a great year. And don't forget, draws are starting to open up. So if you're thinking, and we're going to have some guests on to walk you through these things, I'll walk you through the hunts and the draws that I'm going to take to better help you prepare for your upcoming year. And as always, keep those muzzles pointing in a safe direction and always be on the hunt.